We have an obligation to stand up and to do what's right. I hope we can find our way somehow, somewhere. And this is a great place to start to make a difference. I yield the floor, Mr. President.
Senator from California.
I appreciate the passion with which my colleague spoke, and I couldn't disagree more with her when she says we're masquerading as if we're doing something. Were we masquerading when we brought the Small Business Jobs Bill to the floor and Senator Landrieu, who chairs the Small Business Committee, stood here day after day after day and only faced a filibuster from the Republicans, and we could not get that bill done, and millions of jobs were in the balance? Were we filibustering? No, they were. Were we masquerading? Were we masquerading when we brought the FAA bill to the floor, which my colleague, Senator Snowe, played a huge role in? And thank God we passed it? Were we masquerading? That bill is held up because the House Republicans have not chosen conferees, and we are waiting to have a 21st century aviation system in this great nation where we're using radar that was used in the last century and practically the century before. Come on. We're trying to do our job. She talked about the last election. I'll talk about the last election. I was on the ballot, so I could talk about it. It was about jobs. It was about jobs. And I told my people when I get back here, jobs, jobs, jobs. And I'm proud to say that we have on the floor right now a bill to reauthorize the Economic Development Administration, a program that's been around since 1965 and one which has a stellar record of attracting $7 of private capital for every dollar that we spend. The cost of each job created is approximately $3,000 per job, and they're good jobs. The Chamber of Commerce arm is supporting this, the AFL-CIO, and we are dealing with amendment after amendment after amendment, and it's fine. It's everybody's right, and I appreciate the fact that we will be voting on this amendment too. We even have an amendment to do away with the very agency we're trying to reauthorize by Senator DeMint, even though he had, in 2005, a very big press release lauding the EDA, and as recently as last year, his staff attended a workshop where they're working with the EDA and praising the EDA for their work to reinvigorate jobs. So I appreciate being lectured, and it's everybody's right to do it, and I would do anything to defend my colleagues' right to say whatever they want. It's just not true. What's masquerading here are Republicans who filibuster almost every single thing that we do. Now, I hope and hope and hope that we're going to get to the series of amendments. We're being very cooperative with our colleagues. We're going to take these. Some of these amendments are for show, fine. Everyone has their rights, fine. But let's get it done, and let's get going with an authorization of a bill that's going to create jobs. That's the whole idea of it. And the last time we voted on it, we had a unanimous vote. Since 2004, we had a unanimous vote, and George Bush signed this into law. I just want folks to know I have about another couple of minutes of remarks, and then I'm going to yield such time as you may require to Senator Brown.
Mr. President, what are the rules of discussion or debate right now? Is when the senator from California wraps up her remarks, wouldn't it be appropriate to have someone from the other side speak at that time?
We don't have a unanimous consent agreement controlling the order of the speakers. The senators from Maine and California control the time as they yield.
So I would be happy to make the unanimous consent request that at the conclusion of my remarks, Senator Brown would speak for how many minutes? What? Say 10 minutes, and then it would go to Senator Thune. Is that all right?
Reserving the right to object.
Right. Let me just add.
Senator from South Dakota.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. President, and I don't know that there's any I don't think there's any time agreement here, but I think my understanding is it's been going back and forth, and that when the
Senator
Senator
from South Dakota.
No,
Senator from South Dakota. Anything else? California?
Floor. I have said, I have offered a unanimous consent agreement. We are functioning, dividing the time between the two of us. And it was my decision to yield to Senator Brown because Senator Snowe has spoken for a very long time, and I want him to have the time, and I'm wrapping up my comments. And I'd be happy to put in a unanimous consent request that after Senator Brown's remarks, 10 minutes, that we turn to Senator Thune for 10 or 15 or 20 or whatever it is you want.
Mr. President, just a point of clarification here.
Senator from South Dakota.
My understanding is that the Senator from California cannot yield time to another senator.
I'm not yielding time.
I think,
The senator can yield time, but not the floor. Senator from California.
Thank you. So is there objection to my unanimous consent request that Senator Thune go right after Senator Brown?
That's fine.
For as long as
Well-
we wish?
Well, Mr. President, reserving the right to object, I'm opposed, but you've been addressing the Senate, so wouldn't it be appropriate for the Senator from South Dakota now to speak?
Unanimous consent is that I have the right to call on Senator Brown. I can yield to Senator Brown, is my understanding.
You can yield time, but not control of the floor.
I was
And
going to
there's
yield time to Senator Brown.
Does not give Senator Brown the floor.
Then I will yield to him for some questions. And I can do that under the rules.
That is correct.
All right. So that's what we'll do. Unless my colleagues would rather do it the way we said before. If not, I'll just yield for questions. Either way. It's up to you.
Mr. President, what is the request was that at the conclusion of the Senator from California's remarks that the Senator from Ohio would have how many minutes?
10 minutes.
And then Senator Thune would be recognized for as
Right.
much time as he wished.
I don't have an objection to that.
Is the objection? Senator from Maine.
Yeah. Also, reserving the right to object, I also want to include Senator from Oklahoma, Senator Coburn,
Just
for 10 minutes.
At the conclusion of Senator Thune.
Just reserving the right to object, and I will not object. Could we just have some indication of time frame? It's all fine.
50.
Okay. All right. I think I have the time. Is that right?
Let me make sure. 10 minutes, up to 10 minutes for Senator Brown from Ohio, then Senator Thune to follow, and Senator Coburn to follow.
That's correct.
Is there objection? Without objection,
Okay.
Senator from Ohio.
I have one more question, and I still have the floor. And
Yes.
I said at the conclusion of my remarks we would turn to Senator Brown. How many minutes remain on either side?
68 minutes on the majority and 47 on the minority.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm going to wrap up in a couple of minutes here and come back later, but I think it's very important, and I reiterate what I said before, that I don't think we're masquerading around here. I think we're trying to do our work. The bill that's before us was voted out of the committee. It had hearings. It had a vote. It was bipartisan, unlike the amendment offered by my friend that never had a hearing. So let's be clear. We're not masquerading. We're doing our work. And I only hope that this bill gets better treatment than the small business bill. My friend is speaking for small business. We all know small business is the engine of jobs, and that's why it was shocking to me that the Republicans filibustered the last small business bill that was on this floor. Outrageous when we say we want jobs. Now, the reason I'm going to vote against, to table the Snowe Amendment or against the Snowe Amendment, there are many. One, I said, it's process. We haven't had a hearing. It's very far-reaching. But I also want to talk as chairman of the Environment and Public Works Committee. One of our biggest laws and regulations that stem from it have to do with the Clean Air Act. And the way my friend has put forward her amendment, there would be no benefit put into a regulation because of its impact on the health of us and our families. And the Clean Air Act has been attacked by those who want to say, let's not have regulations for this segment of business and that. We just had a vote in California. 60% of the people, Republicans, Democrats, independents, more than 60% said, we want to see our health protected. So here's what's happened. In 2010, the Clean Air Act prevented 160,000 cases of premature death. Premature death. Now we're going to come in with some regulation, never had a hearing, never had a vote, that's going to not take into account the benefit of a health regulation like that. By 2020, that number is projected to rise to 230 cases of premature deaths. In 2010, the Clean Air Act prevented 1.7 million fewer asthma attacks. Mr. President, we want jobs. We want people healthy. They can't go to work if they can't breathe, because if you can't breathe, you can't work. So let's not get up here and pass something, hasn't had a hearing, hasn't had a vote, and suddenly say we're no longer to take into account the benefits of some of the regulations we have. In 2010, the Clean Air Act prevented 130,000 acute heart attacks. In 2010, the Clean Air Act prevented 3.2 million lost days at school. So my point is, yes, we want regulations to be sensible. Yes, we want them to be flexible. Yes, we should work together to make sure that our businesses aren't facing undue delays and all the rest, and I'm very, very, very willing to do that. But what I'm not willing to do is to pass something that has far-reaching impacts that we don't even know what it would mean to the health and safety of our families, and that would absolutely ignore the benefits of regulations that protect our children's health, their safety, their well-being, and our working families, because a lot of these regulations are meant to protect them. So I hope we will vote down the Snowe Amendment. I appreciate the passion on all sides, and I believe truly we're not masquerading here. We have a bill here with real impacts. A bill that I've shown has made a major difference in job creation, in business creation, and in taking, hope, really, to our most ravaged communities. Such a good program that even Senator DeMint, who says he doesn't like this program, certainly throughout his career has praised the progress that it's done in his state. So with that, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Ohio.
Thank you. I thank the Senator from California. I thank the Senator from South Dakota also for his indulgence, and I will be no more than 10 minutes. I listened to Senator Boxer, and, this EDA issue is really, really important for job creation. I know that when it comes to something like, there's a whole array of issues that EDA is involved with in job creation. Just one of them is what EDA does with incubators, accelerators. I was just last week in Shaker Heights, Ohio, where there were a place called the Launch House. Used to be auto dealership, and there are now 40 entrepreneurs working there. And we know that investment, EDA investment, public dollar investment in these incubators pays real dividends. That the EDA estimates a $10,000 investment creates 50 or more jobs. And we're seeing that in places like Shaker Heights, Ohio, and Youngstown, one of the best incubators in the country. Athens, Ohio is the home of the National Association of Incubators, and they know what that means. I think, Mr. President, as I listened when I was in the presiding before the Senator from Alaska was presiding, I was in that chair and listened to some of this debate, and I'm a bit amazed by it. I think, first of all, let's remember a little bit of history in this country, that when I hear the talking points apparently distributed to all 47 of the Republican senators all coming to the floor and blaming government regulation for every problem known to humankind, forgetting government regulation is seat belts, airbags, safe drinking water, prohibition on child labor, Food and Drug Administration, so that our food is pure and our pharmaceuticals are safe. But they just lump it all together and say, get rid of all this government regulation. I think the history they need to think about is the last time they preached and preached and preached on the Senate and House floor about deregulation, they were successful in deregulating Wall Street, and look what happened to that. So when I hear this sort of preachy, we got to get rid of government regulation, let's be a little more specific. There are some regulations, to be sure, that we should do away with, but when I hear them talk trillions of dollars of regulation, a lot of that is what keeps our food pure, our drinking water safe, our workplaces safe, our quality of life better for the broad middle class. And let's just not forget that. Mr. President, I want to speak for the last 5 or 6 minutes, if my remarks will be separated in the record, about something that my colleagues have, or will be debating fairly soon, I believe, and that is pending trade agreements with South Korea, Colombia, and Panama. It's a bit of deja vu, as Yogi Berra said, deja vu all over again. The promise of new American jobs is an echo that we hear about every 3 or 4 years. Time to do a new trade agreement. Time to, all in the name of free trade, time to promise lots and lots of new job creation, promise more exports for the United States. We heard it with NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, almost 20 years ago. We heard it with PNTR with China in the late 1990s. We heard it with the Central American Free Trade Agreement in the mid part of this last decade, 2003, 4, 5, 6, during those years. And now we're hearing it again with Colombia and South Korea and Panama. I recall both Republican and Democratic administrations saying 200,000 new jobs created by NAFTA. I heard proponents of PNTR promised a more balanced trade relationship with China, new jobs from U.S. exports. Well, we've seen some increased exports to China, but nothing like the number of there are jobs created because of that. I acknowledge that. But nothing like the export from China of goods to the United States, which in essence is outsourcing jobs in the United States. There's a company in Northwest Ohio, in Bryan, Ohio, called the Ohio Art Company. They make something that we're all familiar with, Etch-a-Sketch. Many of us played with as kids. Walmart went to that company, the biggest retailer in the history of the world, went to that company and said, we want to sell your product for less than $10 at Walmart. You know what they did? They basically shut down production in the United States, moved it to China so they could sell it for under $10, costing hundreds of jobs in that Northwest Ohio community. And what's happened with this? In 1999, before PNTR, before these promises about increased jobs, we had a $68 billion trade deficit in goods with China. Last year, it was $273 billion. About $600 or $700 million every single day we bring in from, we buy from China, then we sell to China. And that's not, I hear this word unsustainable in this body all the time about Medicare, about the defense, whatever they're talking about. But this is what's really unsustainable. You can't keep adding to that trade deficit and think that we're going to have the kind of jobs. In April alone that we won, in April alone, our trade deficit with China was $21 billion in 1 month, $21 billion. So when I hear this year the Korean trade agreement, the President of the United States is going to submit it to Congress fairly soon, I assume, depending on what happens with the trade adjustment assistance. And this president has made this agreement with Korea significantly better than the last president's trade agreement with Korea, but not all that good yet. The Congressional Budget Office estimates this agreement will cost, in addition to the jobs issue, but hold on that for a second, Congressional Budget Office estimates this agreement will cost about $7 billion over the next 10 years. $7 billion. Are my conservative friends on the other side of the aisle going to say, how are we going to pay for this $7 billion? They want to offset cuts in, they want to offset any other kind of spending, but they don't seem to want to offset spending on this trade agreement. So it's costing us $7 billion, this trade agreement. So free trade, it simply is not free. The administration says this agreement is expected to support, not create, support 70,000 jobs. Do the math. It's about $100,000 for every job supported. But do another piece of math, if I could ask the indulgence of the presiding officer. George Bush I said for every billion-dollar trade deficit or surplus, that translates, these are his numbers, translates into about 13,000 jobs. So when I mentioned that trade deficit with China a minute ago, $21 billion just in April alone, every $1 billion, 13,000 jobs either gained or lost. If it's a budget deficit, trade deficit, I mean, of $21 billion, that means $21 billion at 13,000 jobs for every $1 billion loss. So you can see, without belaboring this point or putting too fine a point on it, you can see that there is significant job loss from these trade agreements. The Obama administration sought to address the Bush administration's neglect of American auto makers, which the free trade agreement that the Bush administration negotiated with North Korea did. But I fear we haven't gone far enough. Korea is the most closed automotive market in the world to American and to other foreign autos. No manufacturer can export vehicles in significant volumes into Korea, not Toyota, not Volkswagen, not Ford, not Fiat. U.S. vehicle exports to Korea in 2010 were 7,500 units, a country of approaching 90, perhaps 90 million people in Korea, 80, 90, 95 million people. Exports, we sell them 7,500 cars. Imports currently make up about 6% of the Korean auto market. 6% of cars driving around South Korea are made somewhere other than South Korea. That's not quite fair trade. And this bill, this Korean free trade agreement, doesn't get us there. The Obama administration improved it, but nothing like it needs to be. So I just caution my colleagues, the Korea Free Trade Agreement is a permanent agreement. And if we pass this agreement in a couple of months, what we pass in establishing that formalized trade agreement with that major industrial country in East Asia is a permanent relationship. It doesn't sunset like a so-called authorization. It doesn't sunset the way many of my colleagues have recently let the trade adjustment assistance lapse for service workers and for workers who lose their jobs to countries we don't have a free trade agreement with. Some of my colleagues insist trade adjustment assistance needs to be reauthorized in short-term little baby steps, year-by-year intervals, while they press for more permanent trade agreements. So here's the deal, Madam President. I know you in North Carolina have showed real leadership on these trade relationships. Here's the deal that conservative politicians here and in the House of Representatives want. They want us to pass permanent trade agreements, but then they want to take care of workers just, 1 year at a time, 6 months at a time, 6 weeks at a time, the last time they reauthorized this. So this just doesn't make sense, Madam President. The trade agreement with Korea is a significant problem for job growth in our country and for protecting jobs in our country. There's nothing wrong with the word protecting jobs in our country. But at the same time, before we even consider that, we need to make sure that we pass the trade adjustment assistance. We should have learned our lessons from NAFTA, from PNTR with China, from the CAFTA, and from these other trade agreements, that the promises coming from an administration on job creation when it comes to trade agreements are mostly empty promises. Madam President, I yield the floor. I thank Senator Thune from South Dakota for his indulgence.
Madam President.
The senator from South Dakota.
Madam President, I rise in support of the legislation, or the amendment, I should say, that's been proposed today by my colleagues from Maine and Oklahoma, Senators Snowe and Coburn, the Freedom from Restrictive, Excessive Executive Demands and Onerous Mandates Act of 2011. This is I think, very commonsensical piece of legislation. It's something that certainly responds to a concern that I hear from small businesses all across this country about the need for relief from burdensome one-size-fits-all federal regulations. And, we hear a lot of discussion here in the Senate and around this town and around the country, for that matter, because that's where it really matters, about creating jobs. And yet, for all the rhetoric about job creation, it seems that there is very little that is actually being done with regard to the substance of putting the right kind of policies in place that will make it cheaper and easier for small businesses to create jobs. It seems like everything that we do here makes it harder, more difficult, and more expensive for our small businesses to create jobs. And as the senator from Maine has very correctly pointed out, 70% of the jobs in our economy are created by small businesses. And I think that there are a whole range of issues that impact small businesses in this country and their ability to create jobs. My colleague from Ohio just talked about trade. I happen to have a view on trade that you ought to have trade agreements that are fair, that are enforceable, obviously, but that we are a country that benefits enormously from the opportunity to export the things that we grow and make here to other countries around the world. And just to give you an example of one particular country, one of the bilateral trade agreements that is under consideration, or at least I wish was under consideration, has been negotiated and has not been submitted by the White House yet to the Congress for consideration, is the one with Colombia. And I mentioned this earlier today in some remarks on the floor that if you look at it and its impact on agriculture in this country, in 2008, in the commodities of corn, wheat, and soybeans, our country had 81% of the market, Colombian market, when it comes to those three agricultural commodities. In 2010, that was down to 27%. Why? Because a lot of other countries that had negotiated free trade agreements with Colombia have stepped in to fill the void because we don't have that kind of an agreement. And so, Madam President, this has very direct and profound impacts on the American economy. Because when you lose that kind of market share, 81% in 2008 down to 27% in 2010, that is a significant amount of jobs that are impacted by industries in this country. Same thing would be true with Panama and South Korea, all of which would be our trade agreements that are teed up, that have been sitting and languishing for 3 or 4 years now without action in the United States Senate. It is absolutely insane for us not to be moving trade agreements that could benefit our economy and create jobs at a time when job creation, certainly at least rhetorically around here, is stated to be the #1 priority that we deal with. You know, when it comes to jobs in the economy, and I think there are a number of things, as I said, that impact that, trade being one, but a number of policies coming out of Washington that impact small businesses and their ability to create jobs. Clearly, tax policy is one. Tax policy is something that I think needs to be reviewed in this country. We need tax reform. It's long overdue. It's making us non-competitive with other countries around the world because our tax laws are outdated relative to other countries. Our tax rates are higher relative to every other industrialized country in the world, with the exception perhaps of Japan. That is something that we need to be looking at if we're serious about being competitive and about growing our economy and in the global marketplace, creating the kind of jobs that we need here at home. We've got to have trade policies, tax policies that are conducive to economic growth and job creation. The other area, however, that we really can be impacted by what happens in Washington is regulations. And that's what this particular amendment is really all about. It's about making regulations coming out of Washington, D.C. reasonable, making them based upon common sense, making them based upon science, making them just from any objective bystander or person out there, observer, who looks at these regulations to say, you know, they're trying really hard not to make it more difficult for small businesses to create jobs in this country. But I think what happens too often is the exact opposite. It looks like what's coming out of Washington are heavy-handed, burdensome requirements, mandates, and regulations which drive up the cost of doing business in this country. And frankly, I don't disagree with what some of my colleagues on the other side have said about regulations that are important to public health and safety. What I am talking about here is excessive, overreaching regulations which, Madam President, in some cases go beyond the congressional intent, the statutory purpose that Congress, when they enacted the laws, wanted to see take place. And so you've got regulatory agencies that go way beyond the congressional intent and the statutory purpose with regard to many of these policies that are being put in place. Now, I have to say, Madam President, that when I travel my state of South Dakota, and for that matter, outside the state of South Dakota, and I talk to small businesses, I talk to agricultural producers, the just overriding theme, consistent theme that I hear over and over and over again is you have got to get these regulatory agencies, these out-of-control regulatory agencies, under control. They keep spinning out and kicking out more and more regulations that are making it more difficult for us to grow our businesses and to create jobs. Now, maybe that's a function of the fact that we have a government that has gotten too big and out of control. If you look at government today relative to historical standards, we're looking at government as a percentage of our entire economy today being somewhere in the 24 to 25% range. I mentioned earlier this morning in some remarks on the floor that back in the year 1800, government was actually 2% of our entire economy. Our entire economic output at that time 2% represented what we spend on federal government. Today we're spending a quarter of every dollar of our entire economic output is just federal government. That doesn't include state and local governments. When you add those in, you get up over 40%. And the trajectory that we're on today will take us up to 40% spending on federal government to GDP in the not-too-distant future. If you look at 2035, 2040, that's where we are headed if we stay on our current path. So it necessarily follows, I suppose, that when government keeps getting bigger, more expansive, more government regulations, more government red tape, more bureaucracy, it is a natural outgrowth of a growing government. What I frankly think makes the most sense, Madam President, is for us to be creating jobs in the private economy. And what we've seen here in just the last few years is the government economy is growing relative to the total economy. The private economy, thereby, is shrinking. Because we've seen over the last 40 years the average of the federal government as a percentage of our entire economy being 20.6%. So 20.6% of our entire economy is spending by the federal government. As I said, now it's 24 to 25%. So we are on a path. We are rapidly ramping up, rapidly growing the size of government relative to our entire economy. That, Madam President, is not where we want to go if we're serious about creating good-paying, permanent jobs for people in this country. Those jobs originate and come from the private sector. They come from small businesses. That's where we want to create the jobs in this country. And so I would say that the amendment that's being proposed by the senator from Maine and the senator from Oklahoma is a very reasonable one, because all it's simply saying is that before these new regulations go into place, that small businesses ought to have access to some review and perhaps even, if necessary, to the court system to make sure that those regulations are consistent with the legislative intent and not overly burdensome and putting an unnecessary and excessive burden on our small businesses. And so I think it's a very common sense, and if we're serious about job creation, if we're serious about economic growth, getting the economy back on track, this is the very type of legislation that we ought to be supporting. Too often around here, we end up off on these tangents, working on things that really don't have an impact on job creation. I will say that one of the things that we should be working on and that we're not, and it's now been 771 days since Congress passed a budget. Think about that. $3.7, $3.8 trillion in annual spending, and it's been 771 days now since Congress passed a budget. It strikes me, at least, that if we are serious about getting our fiscal house in order and sending signals to the economy and to the market that we want to create jobs, the first thing that we could do is get the fiscal house in Washington, D.C. in order. And yet we've had 771 days now without a budget. I think if you are really serious about getting the economy back on track, you have to also restrain spending. You've got to grow the economy. You've got to restrain federal spending. And because when you have a government that's growing at the rate that ours is, it does crowd out private investment. It makes it more difficult for small businesses to get access to capital to create jobs because they're competing with the government. But back to the issue at hand here, and that's regulations. I just think that whether it's a farmer or rancher in South Dakota, and by the way, I spoke yesterday with someone who was in town representing a livestock organization in my state, number one issue, overreaching government regulations, driving up the cost of doing business in this country. And you look at some of the proposals and suggestions that are out there, and sometimes it falls into the category of you can't make this kind of stuff up. There was a proposal under consideration here recently at the EPA, which they have not, to be fair, promulgated regulations on yet, or proposed regulations on yet, but that would regulate fugitive dust. I mean, imagine and think about what that means in an agricultural area of this country. What essentially means is you couldn't have dust from your property drift over onto someone else's property. Some of this stuff just borders on insanity. And I think that's the point that is being made by the amendment by the senator from Maine, is let's use some common sense. Let's use some reason here. If we're going to have these regulations, at least put them forward in a way that doesn't disproportionately, adversely affect small businesses and make it more difficult for them to create jobs. Another example, just last month, the DOT started seeking comment on the need for commercial driver's licenses for individuals who are driving off-road farm equipment like tractors. Well, where I come from, that's a pretty important part of our economy. You've got a lot of young people working in farm operations, a lot of people, period, who are out there who grow up learning or knowing how to drive tractors, how to handle farm equipment, and this particular requirement would force them to get a commercial driver's license. I mean, some of this stuff, like I said, it falls in the category you can't make these kinds of things up. The EPA recently threatened ranchers in the Flint Hills region of Kansas to stop or limit the controlled burn of their prairie pastures, which is a practice that allows for the new growth of grass to feed cattle, or to be faced with EPA-mandated regulations. The list, Madam President, goes on and on and on. And it strikes me again that when you have as many of these studies that are out there and lots of data to support these arguments, that we ought to be responding in a way that recognizes that science, data, input from people who are impacted by these regulations ought to have more of an influence on the regulations that are imposed by these agencies. And what this does is it simply puts in place a way in which small businesses can get access to that kind of a review. And so I hope that my colleagues here in the Senate will support the Snow-Coburn amendment and move us in a direction where we are dealing fundamentally with the issues that are important to our economy right now. Because for all the rhetoric, as I said earlier, about wanting to grow the economy and create jobs, it seems like every policy coming out of Washington, D.C. is contrary to that objective. And again, whether that's tax policy, trade policy, energy policy, but perhaps more importantly now than ever, regulatory action coming out of the executive branch of the government and running amok by creating all kinds of roadblocks and hurdles and impediments to job creation in this country. Again, when you're at 9.1% unemployment, when you have as many people out of work as we have and who have been out of work for as long as they have, you would think that first and foremost we would be looking at policies that make it easier and less expensive to create jobs in this country. And what is happening is we are making it more difficult and more expensive to create jobs by these excessive, overreaching, runaway regulations that are coming out of federal agencies every single day. It is, Madam President, hands down, the thing that I hear more than anything else from people in my state of South Dakota. As I said, whether that's the Farm Bureau or a livestock group or a small business organization, regulations, government regulations right now is the thing that they state most often as the biggest impediment to them going out there and creating jobs. So this is a very common sense amendment. It's something that our small businesses are all supporting. You saw the list of small business organizations that the senator from Maine put up earlier. This, to me, is something that this Senate ought to act on and act on today, and I hope we will get a strong affirmative vote. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Would the senator yield for a question?
The senator from Louisiana.
Just to yield for the senator, is the senator aware that there are at least 4 other bills, Senator Vitter, Senator Roberts, Senator Collins, and Senator Portman, in addition that Senator Lieberman is developing a comprehensive bill on reg reform? Is the senator aware of those other bills?
Well, I would say through the chair that there may be many efforts, as there typically are here in the Senate, to address some of the issues. And a lot of our members have different ideas about how best to do that. I happen to believe that the proposal put forward by the senator from Maine is a very, as I said, reasonable, common sense approach to this. The Regulatory Flexibility Act is something that is in need of some revisions, particularly in light of the fact that we have so many regulations coming out of these agencies that are so costly, so difficult, and so burdensome for small businesses in this country. I think we ought to be at every opportunity looking for ways to lessen the cost and the difficulty for our small businesses to create jobs.
Well, through the chair, I understand that Senator Colburn under UC has the next 15 minutes, but I would just end my question through the chair saying that I think the senator is right. There are some regulations that are coming fairly fast and furious, but I think the senator would also understand that the normal process is reviewing the bills at the committee level, comparing and contrasting, and then bringing the best approach to the floor. And that's what some of us are objecting to. It's not the goal of reducing regulations, it's the process. Thank you.
Madam President.
The senator from Oklahoma.
Thank you. I've listened to the debate all morning as original co-sponsor with Senator Snowe on her bill. I want to talk about the EDA first, and then I'll talk about what most of us don't realize, because most of us haven't taken the time to look. There's 80 economic development programs in the federal government through 4 agencies that spend $6.6 billion a year. Not one of them has a metric on it to see if it's successful. We've heard all morning about $3,000 per job. That's all self-reported stuff, no oversight on it, no committee oversight on it, no hard work to see. There's not a metric on one of these programs to see if it's working. And now we have a bill on the floor to spend another $500 million a year on something we have no idea what. We have anecdotal evidence, but what does the OIG say? The OIG says, first of all, this program has been used as a congressional slush fund to direct money to friends of members of Congress. That's what they say. Fully 1/3 of the projects in this never come to completion. So the money that was spent on it ends up being totally wasted. And we're reauthorizing a bill that nobody can show the statistics that it is, in fact, effective. And it's not just that we're reauthorizing this bill. We have 79 other programs. Ask yourself a question. We're $14 trillion in debt. We're nearly bankrupt. We're running a $1.5 trillion deficit, and we've got a bill on the floor to spend $500 million, and we don't know whether it works or not. We claim through anecdotal, we see positive things every now and then. Well, you know, there's positive outcomes to illness, too. But the fact is we don't know what we're doing. And what the Congress ought to be doing is saying, if, in fact, it's a role for the federal government to have economic development activities, then we ought to center it in one area, and we ought to have 1 or 2 programs, not 80, with 80 sets of administrators, 80 sets of commissions, and $6.6 billion a year, of which half of it doesn't accomplish any purpose for the American people other than make the senators and congressmen feel good because they think they may have done something. So the whole idea that we would put forward a bill that has never truly been oversighted in terms of the way everybody else would oversight the way they spend their money to see if it's effective in the whole, not anecdotal evidence of one company or one benefit, put it all together. And if we have a role, let's put together a program that will work, 1. Number 2, that has metrics on it so we can measure whether or not it's effective when we're spending. We're actually borrowing the money to do this. By the way, if we actually pass this bill and $500 million gets spent, we're going to borrow $200 million from the international financial community to do it. And when we know 1/3 of it's wasted, that just doesn't make any sense. So the whole idea of Congress passing this EDA bill in light of not doing oversight on the other 79 economic development programs under the other 4 agencies is the definition of insanity. We don't know what we're doing. Now let's talk about regulation for a minute. There's well over $2 trillion in the United States sitting in small, medium, and large businesses right now that's not invested for jobs. Now, why is that? Why are people afraid to go out and invest and get a return on capital? It's because they don't see any clarity in the future. And the administration that we have today has issued 40% more regulations, 40% more regulations than any administration in history in the first 2 years. And one of the reasons people don't have confidence is they can't handle the regulatory framework that's coming at them so fast. The other thing I've observed is that when regulations are written, they're oftentimes written without people with the real knowledge of what they're writing the regulations for. 80% of the regulations written in this country are written by lawyers within the agency with which they're doing it. Now, I like lawyers, that's good enough, but how about having somebody that has real experience in the area at which they're writing a regulation rather than a lawyer write a regulation for? A great example is one of the good things about the new health care bill was going to be where we combine things together into accountable care organizations, where we end up putting hospitals and doctors and physical therapists and mental health workers all together, and then we work as a team so we can cut the cost and not have duplication and get better outcomes. The regulations on that were 220 pages long with 65 things you have to do every day on every patient to report back to the federal government. Well, that's just idiotic. It's asinine. And yet that's the regulations that came out on one of the, what I view as one of the few positive things about the Affordable Care Act. The senator from Maine outlined the cost of business regulation to small businesses and large businesses. It's $1.7 trillion a year. That's fully 12% of our GDP is the cost of regulations that are coming from the federal government. And all this bill says is a way to force the administration and the agencies, and it doesn't matter if it's a Republican or Democratic agency or administration, they're both the same. It doesn't have anything to do with what party's in power in the administration. But to hold the agencies accountable that they'll look at the impact of the regulations that they write so that they're not counterproductive to our country. We're at a time period where we're at great risk as a nation. Great risk. Because we're so overly exposed on our debt and our deficit. For every 1% increase of interest rates that we're going to see next year, it's going to cost us, the taxpayers of America, $150 billion additional. And there's no question we're going to see interest rates rise in this country. So to not create the confidence of the small and medium businesses to go out and build that next production line or build a way to produce this next new idea, because what they're seeing is so much blowback from an unaccountable, misdirected federal government. And so what Senator Snowe wants to do is totally connected with common sense, but, you know, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that, and the excuse is we haven't been through committee. Well, let me tell you, a third of the bills that come to the floor of the Senate have never been through the committee. And now we're saying an amendment has to come through the committee? It's ludicrous. It's also false. It is, we really don't want to let go of, we don't trust the American people. That's what it really says, is we really don't trust the American people to use common sense. And the reason we don't is because we have no connection with common sense whatsoever in this body. And because we can't figure it out, we don't think they can. And so Big Brother has to tell you every time, every location, at every situation what you can do. And the thing that's changed in my adult lifetime is when I was a medical device manufacturer in the 70s, the presumption was on the government to prove that I was doing something wrong. With our regulatory framework now, the presumption is on you, the American citizen, to prove you didn't do something wrong. And that's why this over-regulation, this attendance to detail that matters nothing except on the top of a pen, a gnat on the top of a pen, and it's out there, and it is so costly in terms of the cost of compliance that makes no difference in terms of somebody's outcome. But the main thing it's costly is it's costing us jobs. It's costing us the very thing that built this country, is the idea that you can go put together an idea and put it out there and you can build on that idea with hard work, minimal capital, and you can make it a success, except the thing that's blocking that now is the regulations that are coming from the federal government. And this is a very straightforward bill. It's just hold the bureaucrats accountable. And if they're not going to be held accountable, you've got a way to hold them accountable. I don't get it. I don't get why anybody would be objectionable to this. Because it's not stopping regulations. It's just saying you got to figure out whether it's prudent. And if you're not following the Regulatory Flexibility Act, then we're going to make you, because we're going to give you a basis through a court of law to be able to do that. Now, what's wrong with that? Nobody's addressed what's wrong with that. What they just said is, no, we don't like it. We don't want it. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure an amendment that will actually fix the problems in this country, that will actually start creating jobs, that will actually move money sitting on the sideline into investment to create opportunity for new jobs for the Americans, when we have 17 million Americans who really want to work that can't, we're going to defeat it. We're so disconnected with what really is important in this country. It is so frustrating. I'm surprised I still have hair in my head. Senator Snowe knows more about small business in this Senate than any other senator. She's worked on it for years. She knows the problem. She's offered a solution that is common sense, that will work, that won't cost a lot of money, but will rein in the bureaucracy when they do the wrong thing or they don't follow the law. And for us to say, no, not going to do it because there may be a small amount of risk that something might go wrong, that's exactly the same way the bureaucracies work. And let me tell you how they work. They never do what's best for the country. They do what's safe for the bureaucracy. And that's why we have so much regulation. It's because they don't want to get criticized. You know, you can't walk through life without getting criticized. Nobody's perfect. And no agency's perfect. So let's hold them accountable. Let's help them be better. Let's be uplifters to them. Let's put some tools there that will enable us to have a good regulatory framework that actually accomplishes the purpose of regulations but doesn't destroy what small amount of manufacturing and business we have left. With that, Madam Chairman, I'd like to put a statement into the record and would yield the floor.
Without objection. The Senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. President. I understand our side has about 50 minutes left in this debate. We'll be voting on the Snowe amendment at 2:15, so I'm going to speak at least for the next 15 or 20 minutes. There's no one else on the floor on our side, and we'll continue to try to answer some of the issues that have been raised in the last few minutes about this particular amendment. First of all, I have a great deal of respect from the senator from Oklahoma, and nobody really has worked harder on trying to bring more efficiencies to the federal government. He's spent hours and hours and hours in meetings, official meetings, informal meetings, on budgets and efficiencies and regulations. So I have a great deal of respect for the senator from Oklahoma personally. But I do take offense at some of the, not just suggestions, but accusations and specific attacks made on this floor against the government. 2 or 3 were just issued from the speech he just gave, statements like this: the bureaucracy never takes risk. Well, I'd like to ask him, what bureaucracy did he think supported the elimination of Osama bin Laden? Does the senator from Oklahoma believe there were no risk taken by this bureaucracy that he so routinely, and I think he so routinely wants to degrade to no good end? I would ask him, if he were still on the floor, no risk were taken by anyone when they launched the strike against Osama bin Laden that eventually killed him. Would the senator from Oklahoma suggest that we have no regulations on Wall Street? We should just trust the big international bankers of the world to do what's right every day for the people of Oklahoma. I know that the people on Wall Street wake up every morning and think to themselves while they're eating breakfast, what can I do today to help the people in Oklahoma or in Louisiana? Of course, that's absurd. There is a place for appropriate regulation, and bureaucracies aren't always bad. And when George Washington led the creation of this country, he most certainly had in his mind a government that worked for the people, by the people. Let's fix the government. Let's not tear it down by statements that have no basis in fact, that do not uplift people, do not encourage people. They numb people. They make people angry. They make people think there is no hope when there is. There are thousands of people that put on a uniform every day and go to work for this country. They are mothers, they are fathers, they are grandparents, they are aunts and uncles. They work hard, and they do not deserve the disparaging remarks that come too often from the other side of this aisle. If you don't like government, you've made it plain, then fix it. And one of the ways to fix it is to take a bill. This is not an amendment that Senator Snowe has. It is a bill. I have seen it. She's asked me to co-sponsor it. I have declined. It is a bill. It is a major bill that has jurisdiction, that will find its jurisdiction in not one committee, not the Small Business Committee, but in 5 committees, have jurisdiction over the aspects of Senator Snow's bill. One of the reasons that we shouldn't vote favorably, not because we're not for reg reform, it's because this bill has ramifications that go far beyond the Small Business Committee, of which I chair, and it goes to about 5 or 6 other committees that need to have a look at the provisions in her bill. That's one reason. We've asked to go through the committee process. Number 2, there are, at least to my knowledge, 4 other bills that attempt to fix this over-regulatory reach, which I agree with Senator Thune, I agree with Senator Colburn, and I agree with Senator Snowe, needs to be tapped down, harnessed. Not eliminated, but tapped down and harnessed and made less onerous for all business, not just small business, but for all business. But there are at least 4 other bills that I know that are attempting to do that. One by Senator Vitter, one by Senator Roberts, one by Senator Collins, and one by Senator Portman. I have not had the opportunity to review in detail all of these other bills, but I'm sure they have some very excellent points to them. The committee process allows a chairman like Senator Lieberman, who's not here today, which would have primary jurisdiction over this, to bring all 5 bills before his committee, hear the best aspects of each, potentially combine them into a bill and bring them to the floor. And you know what? Senator Lieberman, I know, has offered to do that in his committee. That bill could potentially come out of committee, potentially with Senator Snowe as the lead author, since she's worked very hard on it, with others as co-sponsors, a bill that both Democrats and Republicans could agree to that could give some real relief to reg reform. This is not about finding a solution. This is about public relations, campaigns, and Republican rhetoric about the election, and that's what I object to. If this were really about regulatory reform and finding a solution, The 5 senators that have bills and other senators that I know, Senator McCaskill, for one, who is here today, who is developing a bill, Senator Carper, who has spent years on this subject and is quite the expert, they would all come before the Homeland Security Committee, which I have the privilege of serving on, and in a short amount of time, just a few weeks, figure out something that the majority could support. This isn't about fixing the problem. This is about bumper stickers for elections, and I am very tired of it. And I'm not the only one. As chair of the Small Business Committee, I can promise you that our committee, which Senator Snowe is the ranking member, has worked every day very hard through this recession to put forward bills on this floor that could help create jobs, bring relief. In fact, one of the most burdensome regulations that the business community was just screaming about, our committee was very aggressive in helping to eliminate, and that was Section 1099, which would have required every business to report to the IRS any purchase that they made for goods over $600. It would have brought many businesses to its knees, buried in paperwork. Did our committee sit around and twiddle its thumb? No. We worked hard. We had, I think, the only hearing in the whole Congress on 1099 and repealed it. Now, finance helped and others helped. It took us a while to find the right offset. But the minute the business groups brought that to our attention, the Chamber of Commerce and others, we said we made a mistake. It's going to take us a while to find the $20 billion to offset it, but we'll look, and before it goes into effect, we'll repeal it, and we did. So when members from the Republican side come to the floor to say Democrats don't care about regulatory burdens, I find that offensive, and it's not helpful. This bill is not on the floor on regulatory relief. This bill is on a small but effective economic development program that happens to work beautifully in my state. And contrary to what the senator from Oklahoma and others said, this program in Louisiana, as far as Louisiana is concerned, actually works. One of the reasons that it works so well is because many of the decisions about the grants are not done in Washington, but done at the regional level. Our office happens to be in Austin, Texas. When the Chamber of Commerce come to visit me, not always huge supporters of the Democratic caucus, but when my chambers come to see me, they say to me, Senator, one of the best programs that our members like and feel the federal government does a very good job are these EDA grants, because they're not that bureaucratic. They make quick decisions. They help us fill gap financing and programs that make a meaningful difference to the people in our community. I didn't raise the subject when I went to speak to the Chambers of Commerce. They raised it to me. Now, maybe the senator from Oklahoma is correct that some of these monies were earmarked, but we don't allow earmarks anymore. So this program is going to go without earmarks directed by members. And it's going to be done at a regional basis, and these programs have been, at least in the Louisiana's experience, quite effective. Louisiana Tech, one of my universities, received a $2 million EDA grant. I'm going to submit this to the record. Our ongoing partnership with EDA has greatly enhanced the university's overall economic development efforts. We're creating the EDA University Center, et cetera, from the mayors of both cities, Monroe, and, I don't know, I do trust my local elected officials. I do trust the people I represent. When they say a program works, I like to believe them. The list of projects, recent investments in Louisiana, $1.2 million to Tulane University. Can I tell you one thing about Tulane University, since it was damaged significantly after Hurricane Katrina? We have over 45,000 applicants to this school. Why do people want to come to Tulane? Not only because it's a great school, but it's in a great city that's rebuilding itself. You know what's helping us rebuild ourselves? An EDA grant that some people would like to eliminate. $1.2 million to Tulane University. It's a microloan program. I believe the people at Tulane University. I have a great respect for Scott Cowan and their board. Everywhere I travel around the United States, as a senator, I could not be prouder when people come up to me and say what a great university Tulane is. I don't need somebody in Washington telling me how good this program is. I have the people I represent at home telling me. $775,000 to the Downtown Development District, which was underwater after Katrina, given to the Idea Village. You know where the Idea Village was latest advertised? Maybe on the front page of Enterprise magazine, maybe in Time magazine. This Idea Village is one of the best ideas in the whole country. You know who funded it? The program that Senator Boxer is trying to reauthorize. $400,000 for a startup fund for the creation and development of stimulus funds to support fledgling enterprises in the greater New Orleans region. Our seafood industry went completely, no pun intended, underwater after the BP oil spill. This agency stood up and gave them when no one else would. BP wouldn't give them a penny. Ken Feinberg wouldn't give him any money. They gave them $350,000 to keep their head above water. The Seafood Promotion Board, that's why people are eating, in large measure, Gulf Coast shrimp today. So I don't know what report Senator Colburn is looking at, but the May 19th report says right here, GOA states, they have not concluded that duplication exists among programs and plans to address these issues in their future work on overlap and duplication. I don't know if the senator has asked his Chamber of Commerce from Oklahoma, but I'm going back to my office and I'm going to call him myself because I'd like to find out. Maybe their program works a little differently in Oklahoma than it works in Louisiana. But when I called my people at home, and they'll tell me, Senator, some of these programs aren't worth a hill of beans and you should eliminate them. These programs are too difficult. I have that all the time by some programs. Not all the time, but some programs. This isn't one of them. And the reason I'm a little exercised is because I'm like deja vu. I came down to this floor 4 weeks ago to try to get a similar program in size, a 1.2, no, I'm sorry, what was our program, 1.2, Don, SBIR? $1.2 billion program that's worked so well. Senator Warren Rudman had created it. It was a great program. It's really like the country's best venture capital program for all small business. It makes money. It doesn't lose money. And we got the same thing done to us by the other side of this aisle that says, we don't really care about small business over here because we have to talk about X, Y, and Z. So, I mean, this is like the second time one of our chairmen, I was the first, now Senator Boxer, is trying to bring to the floor, not a complicated program. It's a little program, but it has a big bang for the buck. It gets rave reviews from the people in my state, Republicans mainly, but Democrats as well. And we can't seem to get this program approved until we take bills that members want to put on the bill that have nothing to do with this bill that haven't gone through committee. So I'm going to be voting against Senator Snow's bill. But to make clear, I support Senator Snow's efforts to reduce regulatory reform. My people in Louisiana are screaming about this. I've tried to communicate this to the administration in many ways, whether it's EPA or the Corps of Engineers or the more recent that's coming out of one agency that wants all of my oil field workers to put on hazmat suits to go to work. Now, if you put on a hazmat suit in Louisiana when it's 100 degrees, you couldn't get to the oil rig because you'd be fainted before you got there. So I am not unaware, I want the senator from Oklahoma to understand, of some ridiculous rules and regulations that come flying out of some of our agencies. But the way to fix it is not to bring a bill to the floor that has not had a hearing when 6 different committees have jurisdiction, when Senator Lieberman, who has the lead jurisdiction as chair of the Homeland Security, has indicated a complete willingness to take this on. There are enough bumper sticker printing operations in America today. There's only one United States Senate. And I suggest we start acting like a Senate, like a U.S. Senate, and stop acting like a bumper sticker operation. And I yield the floor.